and all other protocols observed, welcome. I welcome you to the 7th Annual AEZO meeting and the 5th Africa Union Commission Symposium on Special Economic Zones. I'm your Master of Ceremony for the day. My name is Shiko Kimeria. I'm the Africa Editor at Quartz. To start us off, we are very fortunate to have a representative of the Head of State, President Muhammadu Buhari, and who we have today is Honorable Minister Umana Okon Umana, the Minister of Nigeria Delta Affairs. So I welcome him on stage to kick off the event. Thank you. A round of applause, please.
Sir.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Honorable Minister, Industry, Trade and Investment, Nigeria, other ministers from other countries in Africa who are here today, the President of the Africa Economic Zones Organization and the other executive members, the managing directors of free zones authorities in Africa, and in particular, the host authorities, the Managing Director of the Nigeria Export Processing Zones Authority, Managing Director of the Oil and Gas Free Zones Authority, distinguished investors from Nigeria and the rest of Africa, distinguished participants at this conference, ladies and gentlemen. I want to say that on a personal note, I consider myself a member of the Free Zones family because I was the immediate past Managing Director of the Oil and Gas Free Zones Authority. I was also in Ghana where we had the last conference. So I am a full member of this family. But let me now go to the address of Mr. President, who I have the privilege and honor of representing today. It gives me great pleasure to welcome delegates from across Africa and indeed the world to Abuja, Nigeria, for the 7th annual meeting of the Africa Economic Zones Organization. I was also informed that you chose Nigeria as the host to enable your organization to join us in celebrating 30 years existence of Free Zone Scheme in Nigeria. The Free Zone Scheme in Nigeria, which started 30 years ago with the idea of utilizing the Export Processing Zone Scheme to promote export-oriented industries, has evolved over the years from a strictly export-oriented manufacturing strategy to a more liberal scheme, allowing a greater level of interaction with the domestic economy, while simultaneously driving an increase in the level of attractiveness of the scheme to potential investors. We are therefore ready to partner with special economic zones in Africa to benefit from the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreements. I commend the Africa Economic Zones Organization for bringing together operators of free zones in the continent. This will enhance intra-African trade and promote peer review among the operators. As you deliberate on the theme of the annual meeting, African Special Economic Zones, engine for resilience and accelerator for sustainable industrial value chain development. I urge you to critically examine the factors inhibiting the growth of free zones in Africa and come up with appropriate measures to address any identified challenges. Africa must rise to the occasion and compete favorably with any special economic zones in the world. In Nigeria, government has come up with policies to support private sector involvement in infrastructure projects, and some of our free zones have keyed into this. I am happy to note that the scheme has attracted a significant number of landmark infrastructure projects with sufficient potential to transform the Nigerian economy. Such projects include the newly commissioned deep sea port and a refinery expected to become the largest single train facility of its kind in the world upon completion. Additionally, a free zone enterprise has currently transitioned the country from being a net importer to a net exporter of fertilizer. Other significant projects attracted by the scheme include a mega oil and gas downstream manufacturing hub with dedicated seaport terminals focused on driving local manufacture of oil and gas derivatives for exports, which is strategic to the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. Regardless of the achievements I have mentioned, the scheme in Nigeria still lacks in delivering key economic developmental indices compared to what has been attained by free zone schemes in other climes. Nigerian free zone operators should therefore be ready to learn from their colleagues in this meeting. In conclusion, I wish you a happy deliberation and a pleasant stay in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mana. Next, we'll watch a video with remarks from Dr. Adeshina, Dr. Akinwumi Adeshina, the President of the African Development Bank Group.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to address you today on the 5th African Union Commission Symposium on Special Economic Zones and the 7th meeting of the African Economic Zone Organization. Special economic zones are increasingly gaining momentum in Africa, given the need for Africa to accelerate its economic growth, improve the development of competitive value chains nationally, regionally, and globally, and expand Africa's share and competitiveness in global manufacturing. And there is a good reason for a greater sense of urgency. Without any doubt, Africa's wealth must no longer depend on exports of raw materials, but of finished value-added products. The door to poverty is from export of raw materials. The highway to wealth is industrialization. With rising wages in China and other Asian countries, as they move from labor-intensive industries to more knowledge-intensive industries, they are outshoring their light manufacturing industries. The so-called flying geese model is on the rise as these countries outsource their manufacturing capacities to new industrial manufacturing platforms with lower labor costs, from where they can launch market entry into regional and global markets. Ethiopia has been very successful with its special economic zones, which have allowed it to attract significant investments in multiple industries, including leather, footwear, textile, garments, and pharmaceuticals. Ethiopia's well-established one-stop shops aggressively seek out investors, maintain and strengthen investor-state relations, and use them in turn to attract other investors. My country, Nigeria, has also established the Guangdong-Ogun Free Trade Zone, the Lekki Free Trade Zone, and the Calabar Free Trade Zone. The newly constructed $19 billion Dangote Petrochemical and Fertilizer Complex, indeed the world's largest ammonia plant, in the Free Trade Zone with a new deep sea port, is exactly the kind of massive industrial and infrastructural manufacturing capacity that is needed to make Nigeria a regional and global player in gasoline, diesel, and aviation fuel, and of course, fertilizer value chains. The African Continental Free Trade Area is the continent's best pathway to prosperity. To unlock its potential, however, we must not just simply trade. We must turn the zone into an industrial manufacturing zone with inshoring of manufacturing in Africa. Now, free trade zones that launch prosperity around the world have done so not by trading low-value commodities, but by industrial manufacturing. With the African Continental Free Trade Area zone, the continent needs more industrial manufacturing platforms, and that will be achieved only through greater investments in special economic zones. Your Excellencies, the sector with the greatest potential for industrialization in Africa is agriculture. Africa has 65% of the uncultivated arable land left to feed the world. Therefore, how Africa develops its agriculture will determine the future of food in the world. Across Africa, we must turn cocoa beans into chocolates, cotton into textile and garments, and coffee beans into brewed coffee. That is why the African Development Bank is investing $25 billion in agriculture across the continent to transform the agricultural sector. The African Development Bank is investing over $1 billion in the development of special agro-industrial processing zones that we call SAPZs in 18 countries to help to unlock Africa's potential in food and agriculture. The African Development Bank and our partners, which includes the Islamic Development Bank and the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, we recently launched a joint $538 million investment for the development of special agro-industrial processing zones in Nigeria. We're excited by it. This is part of our broader efforts to unlock Africa's food and agriculture market that is estimated to reach $1 trillion by 2030. Your Excellencies, Africa has an abundance of natural resources, oil, gas, minerals, and metals, as well as an extensive blue economy that must be rapidly industrialized. Think of the following as well. The future of electric cars in the world depends on Africa, given its extensive resource deposits in rare minerals, especially lithium ion, cobalt, nickel, and copper. The size of the electric vehicle market in the world is estimated to reach $7 trillion by 2030, and $46 trillion by 2050. Now, building precursor facilities for lithium-ion batteries in Africa will be 3 times cheaper than in other parts of the world. And that's why the African Development Bank and its partners, which includes the African Finance Corporation, the African Export-Import Bank, the Development Bank of South Africa, the Trade and Development Bank, the European Investment Bank, and the Islamic Development Bank are working together to develop lithium-ion manufacturing value chains in Africa. To industrialize, Africa must solve its major challenge with very low access to electricity. Think of what we have. Africa is endowed with 45% of the world's resources for renewable energy, including solar, hydro, wind, geothermal resources. The African Development Bank has invested over $7.5 billion in the past 5 years alone to expand access to electricity, which has provided electricity for 20 million people. Now, to further boost electricity availability, the African Development Bank is implementing a $20 billion desert-to-power initiative to develop 10,000 megawatts of solar power across 11 countries in the Sahelian zone of Africa, which will provide electricity for 250 million people. Now, this program, which has already garnered massive global support and has commenced in the G5 Sahel countries, will become the world's largest solar zone. To further boost Africa's manufacturing capacity for green energy, the African Development Bank will work with its partners to support the manufacturing of solar panels in Africa. Your Excellencies, the success of the African Continental Free Trade Area depends on closing Africa's infrastructure deficits. The African Development Bank Group has invested over $44 billion in infrastructure over the past 7 years, including roads, seaports, airports, digital communication infrastructure backbones, transport corridors, one-stop border posts, and regional power transmission lines, which are supporting regional power pools. Your Excellencies, as we develop special economic zones, it is time to reimagine industrial manufacturing in Africa. The future of manufacturing is digital. The global digital economy is estimated to be worth over $16 trillion. The use of Internet of Things, that is called IoT, will raise the productivity of labor in manufacturing, develop smart machines, manufacturing platforms and systems, connecting machines and people, and using machine learning and artificial intelligence to improve speed and efficiencies of complex manufacturing processes. The rising in the use of robots for manufacturing will pose a significant challenge for Africa's drive to attract investments. This will be especially the case in labor-intensive light manufacturing. As capital costs continue to fall faster than labor costs, developed countries are shifting towards reliance on industrial robots for manufacturing. Competition will become tougher in global value chains with robotics, as they could wipe out low labor cost advantage of Africa. The fourth industrial revolution, based on automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data computing, 3D printing, and additive manufacturing, a rapidly transforming industrial manufacturing. Africa must therefore look beyond the industries of today into the industries of the future and develop a plan and capacity to compete in the smart industries that will become the main drivers of global economies. Africa must enhance its readiness to transition to digitized and smart manufacturing. It is therefore time for rapid investment in digital skills for manufacturing, retooling of workers, vocational training, digitization of industrial processes, investments in digital infrastructure, and environments. Your Excellencies, let us industrialize Africa. Let us diversify our economies. Let us develop more special economic zones. Let us prosper with the African Continental Free Trade Area. Let's close the door of poverty from the exports of raw materials. Let's open the highways for wealth with industrialization. Thank you very much.
His Excellency Otunba Adeniyi Adebayo, the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment. A round of applause, please.
Thank you. We have a saying in Nigeria, I'm sure many of you have heard it before. They say no condition is permanent. Yesterday, I was here as a representative of Mr. President, so I was the president yesterday. Today, my colleague is the representative of the president, so I'm taking a step back. I'm Mr. second-class citizen today. Thank you very much. The Honorable Minister for Niger Delta Affairs, representing His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, President and Commander-in-Chief of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry from Ghana, my friend and brother, Michael Bafi, MP, other ministers from African countries here present, the Chairman Global Alliance Special Economic Zones, and the executive members of the Global Alliance, the Chairman, AEZO Association, the Managing Director, NEPSA, the Managing Director, OGSA, members of GASES, members of NESA, free zone investors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be here today to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Free Zone Scheme in Nigeria. Throughout history, nations have benefited from people coming from far and wide to trade within their borders. Free trade zones have been a tool that countries around the world have used to expedite and encourage foreign commerce and industry, and Nigeria is no different. Today's session's topic, SEZ development, game changer for Africa's industrialization, comes at a time when Africa is on the cusp of fully implementing the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. The continent is looking for ways to increase our power as an industrialized trading bloc and to further inter-African collaboration. Nigeria's Free Zone Scheme was first developed with the idea of utilizing the Export Processing Zone Scheme to promote export-oriented industries. Over the years, it has evolved into a more liberal scheme that allows greater interaction with the domestic economy and a growing number of incentives that soften the ground for potential investors. 3 decades is a long time, and over the years, there have been challenges that have inhibited the scheme's success. In recent years, however, these challenges have been identified, and the federal government is addressing them head-on. This week's program affords us an opportunity to examine the challenges and successes of SEZ projects across the continent and how they can be strengthened in our various climes. The Free Zone Scheme in Nigeria has been able to record significant milestones. It has given birth to landmark infrastructure projects that have the potential to completely transform the local and regional business environment. An example of this is the recently commissioned deep sea port in Lekki, Lagos, and an oil refinery pegged to become the largest single train facility of its kind in the world upon completion. There is another free zone project located in Brass Bayelsa State that has helped put Nigeria in a position to become a net exporter of fertilizer. These are the kinds of achievements that need to be celebrated, but more importantly, replicated across the continent. SEZ attracting large transformational projects like the ones I just described is how we change the game and the face of the continent. Attracting transformational projects into special economic zones is not something that happens by chance. Investors of this magnitude are courted by countries and have the luxury of choice in deciding where to locate their investment. In order to attract foreign direct investment, a truly serious country must provide a truly enabling environment. Government agencies must not be seen as barriers. They must at least be seen as facilitators and ideally as partners in progress. The act that established the Nigerian Free Zone Regulatory Authorities, Nigerian Export Processing Zones Authority, and the Oil and Gas Free Zone Authority have helped provide for this by making them a one-stop shop where all information regarding free zone operations can be obtained. This may seem like a small thing, but improving cooperation among government agencies has really helped to engender smooth operations in the free zones. Some practical examples of this cooperation is the tripartite Memorandum of Understanding between the Federal Inland Revenue Service and both NEPSA and OGSA. This helps balance revenue mobilization drives with the desired outcomes of the scheme. In the same vein, the Nigeria Customs Service, a key stakeholder, has also accepted to fully implement the free zones concession regarding imports and exports by free zone enterprises into the customs territory. As the government implements more measures like this, the business environment changes and the country becomes a more investor-friendly destination. The theme for the wider event looks at SEZ as an engine for resilience and an accelerator for value chain development. It is currently a challenging time for global supply chains. The continuation of the COVID-19 pandemic has drastically reduced input from China and Europe continues to face supply chain challenges caused by the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The pandemic has highlighted the importance of having resilient alternatives when traditional supply chains are unable to serve our needs. Current global challenges are expected to continue into 2023 and beyond, but a more industrialized Africa can fill almost all of this global demand in a way that benefits us. The world needs what we have to offer,
and a strong SEZ scheme can attract the investment needed to deliver on it. Ladies and gentlemen, the time is now, and we need to build on the opportunity before us. I once more congratulate everybody that has contributed to making Nigeria's SEZ program a success both today and over the past 30 years. As we look forward towards the next 30 years, we must ensure that our zones are designed in a forward-thinking way that attracts tech-centered industrialization and modern practice. I thank you for your time, and I wish you a happy 30th anniversary. May God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I'll welcome Ahmed Benis, the Secretary General of AEZO, on stage.
Good morning, everyone. Ready to get started, I think. We have a long journey today. So, Your Excellency, the President Muhammad Buhari of the Republic of Nigeria, Federal Republic of Nigeria, represented by my friend, His Excellency the Minister Umana Okun Umana, Your Excellency Otumba Adenye Adebayo, Minister of Industry and Trade, Investment of the Republic of Nigeria, my friend and brother, Mr. Michael Oke Buffy, Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry of the Republic of Ghana, Professor Adesoji, CEO of NEPSA, Dr. Tijani, CEO of the Oil and Gas Free Zone Authority, Mr. Nabil Saleh, Chairman of NEZA, distinguished senior officials, dear partners, dear SEZ community, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very, very delighted to be here with you today for this wonderful event and also for sharing this remark. So after the success of the previous edition in Morocco, Cote d'Ivoire, Ethiopia, at the headquarters of the African Union Commissions, then in Ghana at the head office of the CFTA Secretariat, we are today honored to be holding the fifth IUC Symposium and the 7th edition of the annual meeting of the African Economic Zones in Nigeria, which becomes, as I mentioned today, as I mentioned yesterday, the Mecca for the SEZ community. Nigeria is the largest economy of the continent. Is bringing together our community members, our partners, whom I warmly extend my gratitude to for reiterating their promise and commitment to support the development of the African SEZ. The warm welcome from the Nigerian authorities and the strong involvement of the African Union Commission, the great contribution of the African Development Bank, the UNIDO, as well as the UNCTAD, the GIZ, are highly appreciated. A fruitful day is ahead, where our panelists and experts will address matters of major interest to the African SEZ community. The conference and the high-level deliberation will address the general theme of how African SEZ can be the engine for the resilience and accelerator for sustainable industrial value chain development. We can already congratulate ourselves on the success of this edition, which is bringing together more than 400 participants, 54 SEZ representing 32 countries. Ladies and gentlemen, this meeting could not be taking place at a more relevant time. As per the African Economic Zones Outlook, last year editions, there are 203 operational SEZ in Africa, and 73 projects have been announced for completion in the 47 of the 54 countries of the continent. And over the past 5 years, 60 million jobs have been created in agro-processing, industrial fields, services, and more than $2.6 billion have been invested in the development of the SEZ projects across the continent. Globalization, as we know, it is a changing with the consequent disruptions of the global supply chain. In this state of play, some African countries are consolidating national markets to produce and consume in order of self-reliance. Others are doing so at a regional level, calling it strategic autonomy. In this new era, African special economic zones remain the main instruments for deeper continent-wide economic integrations in the era of the CFTA. So while the African region is home to about 17% of the world's population, its only can then trigger economic policy reforms by promoting economic diversifications and exports while preserving domestic linkages. It can provide room for experimenting new policy approach and regulations in the areas like customs, legal, public-private partnership, sustainable development, and green industrialization initiatives. In this context, there is a need for unrestricted support from the governments and local authorities to retain investors' interests in SEZ, provide great flexibility and improved ease of doing business. This is not only critical to power the growth of the African SEZ, but also to boost the growth of the African economies. We need to do more in the future to broadly involve the African SEZ among several stakeholders of the African economic integration agenda. Our organization, AEZO, has been supporting economic zones development in the continent for more than 6 years now, bringing together more than 85 members representing 55 African countries. We are fully convinced that by joining effort, we are stronger, more resilient, more competitive, bringing the best to the African SEZ community. Our spirit should, in this respect, be that of pooling sovereignty to promote collective self-reliance, and the good news is that we have the special economic zones and the foundation through the African Continental Free Trade Area. I conclude by stating that I greatly appreciate your presence and once more welcome you to this year's editions of the AEZO 7th Annual Meeting and the IOC Symposium, to an African that can live up to her full potential. Thank you very much.
Thank you. In the next part of the program, we're going to move to statements from our Nigerian partners. And to start us off, I would like to invite Professor Adesoji Adesugba, the CEO and Managing Director of Nigeria Export Processing Zones Authority, on stage. Thank you.
Good morning. His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, ably represented by my boss, the guru of the Free Zone Scheme in Nigeria, His Excellency the Minister of Niger Delta Affairs, Sir Umana Okon Umana. My boss, His Excellency, the Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Otumba Adeniyi Adebayo. His Excellency, the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry, our brother from the Republic of Ghana, Honorable Michael Okiere. Your Excellency, and amiable Executive Secretary of AEZO, Mr. Ahmed Bernice, my brother and colleague, the highly distinguished Senator Kara, the Managing Director of the One Oil and Gas Free Zone, AEZO delegates from across Africa, our investors from the Free Zone schemes, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed great delight and enthusiasm that I bring you greetings on behalf of my country, Nigeria, the management and the board of the Nigerian Export Processing Zones Authority, NEPZA, and all the stakeholders within the country's free trade zone corridors. I'd like to say that we count it a great privilege to host the 7th annual meeting of AEZO. I recall that I think we bidded with about 14 others. Thank you so much for allowing us to host you. I therefore welcome the leadership of AEZO and all the delegates from across the continent of Africa to Abuja. And I'm sure you've really seen a wonderful city. Here we are safe, it's beautiful, and we regard it as the most modern, truly built African country, built by Africans. So you're welcome to Abuja. As you already are aware of the history of the free zone concept in Nigeria, it actually started about 1977 when it was first pondered upon by the government as a possible economic tool that could be adopted to drive the industrialization process. But it was not until 1992 that it was approved through the enactment of the country's premier free zone regulatory body, the Act 63 of 1992, which established the Nigerian Export Processing Zones Authority, NEPZA. The free zone scheme has indeed opened quite a lot of business opportunities for Nigeria, investors, enterprises, and all the key stakeholders in the last 30 years of our existence. Nigeria has leveraged on this concept to offer enabling business environment that has so far attracted about $26 billion investment through the existing 46 free trade zones and about 625 enterprises operating within those enclaves under the two authorities' supervision. The scheme has also, within this period, created about 150 direct jobs and an estimated 250,000 indirect jobs for our citizens. We hope to enlarge the employment opportunities when the Dangote refinery and the deep sea port become operational in a few months' time. Even as we use the scheme to drive the country's growth, we do this with great consideration for the ultimate benefit and protection of the investors and investments. To this end, our authority has ensured the promotion of economy of scales, which helps enterprises produce at lowest possible cost through our unparalleled incentives and others support policies. Apart from this, we have ensured that the operations within the zones are insulated from the ever-changing economic policies of government that may be somewhat detrimental to what we agreed with the investors. For example, we have entered into an MOU with the Federal Inland Revenue Service on the best steps towards tax administration within the free zones. Similarly, the Nigerian Customs Service, a key stakeholder, recently accepted to implement the free zone concession regarding imports and exports by free zone enterprises into the customs area. Furthermore, the Central Bank of Nigeria is working on the guidelines for banking operations in our free zones. This document will serve as a regulatory instrument to guide the free trade zone offshore banking. There's one other thing we are doing in Nigeria. We're talking to the Securities and Exchange Commission to explore ways that we can actually use the stock exchange, the stock market, to raise capital for operators in the free zones. Also, in order to further guarantee the safety of investments in the zones, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari and Commander-in-Chief of the Nigerian Armed Forces, in his wisdom, approved the establishment of the Special Economic Zones Security Unit, in line with the Free Trade Zone's global best practice. Ladies and gentlemen, the operation of the scheme is not without some challenges, but the authority has continually enjoyed the support of the government in confronting these challenges squarely. This is evident with the ongoing upgrades of infrastructure around the free zones, public zones in the country. We are actually providing about 50 megawatts of electricity in 2 of our zones currently. It's under construction, about 90% fully constructed. Like never before, the authority is now a blend of highly skilled and experienced workforce. We offer very good services to our investors. I'm sure for those people who were here yesterday, you could see the kind of way the investors actually applauded their relationship with our authority. Let me conclude by saying that we still have a lot of room to improve, and we are learning from best practices across the world. That's why it's very important for us to attend AEZO events and to also join hands with other members of the Free Zone family across Africa. Let me use this opportunity to also say you are welcome to Nigeria, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Next, I would like to invite Senator Tijani Yahawa Kaura, the CEO and Managing Director of Oil and Gas Free Zones Authority. Thank you.
His Excellency, President, Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, ably represented by the Honorable Minister of Niger Delta Affairs, Mr. Umana Okonumana, and coincidentally, my predecessor, I've just taken over from him some 4 months ago. I thank you for the sound foundation you laid in the oil and gas free zones. Honorable Minister of Trade, Investment, the Minister supervising our authority, Your Excellency Ni Adebayo, the Deputy Minister of Trade was the Republic of Ghana, Mr. Michael Okere, other ministers from other sister countries present, the President and the Executive Secretary of AEZO, my brother and my colleague, the Managing Director of NEBZA, who has taken us, erroneously has taken us back to 15 years ago when he said, Managing Director, when he addressed me as Managing Director of ONE, Oil and Gas Free Zone. That's 15 years back. We're already 15 years ahead of that. Today, the Oil and Gas Free Zone is boasting of 9 different free zones across the country. Thank you very much. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, invited guests, members of the press, good morning to you all. It is with deep sense of pleasure that I welcome you all to Nigeria, and particularly to our Federal Capital Territory, which is Abuja, for the 7th Annual General Meeting of Africa Special Economic Zones Organization. This historic event coincides with the 30th anniversary of Free Zones schemes in Nigeria. It is therefore two very important events happening to us in Abuja today. We are glad to see that the desire of Nigeria expressed last year to host the 7th Annual General Meeting has been accepted, and it has today been realized. We thank you very much for accepting our request to host this meeting in Nigeria. I therefore particularly thank the executive members of Africa Economic Zone Organization for giving Nigeria the privilege to host this meeting. I thank you once again. We are also appreciative of the fact that African Union Commission is similarly holding its 5th symposium on special economic zone in the same week in Nigeria, and particularly in Abuja. This is a very important feat. I welcome all the 3 segments of activities today. It is indeed a new dawn for Africa as we pursue very earnestly a more integrated continent. Using the AFCTA as a backdrop, our quest for improving, accelerating economic development is amplified significantly through the special economic zones. Here in Nigeria, our economic zone scheme has evolved from export processing zone in 1992 through the free trade zones in 1996 and now to the globally adopted special economic zones. These terminologies, of course, refer to specially dedicated locations that are set aside to encourage and enhance economic activity in a bid to boost economic development of the continent. The theme of the 7th Annual General Meeting is most appropriate because it is in harmony with the essence of African Continental Development Plan and the urgent need to harness the rich natural resources that our continent is well blessed with. This esteem, therefore, African Special Economic Zones, engine for resilience and accelerator for sustainable industrial value chain development, comes at a time that African governments have desired for a full, deeper economic, cultural, and social integration of the continent. It is therefore our expectation that this forum will enhance understanding and communications between policymakers, regulators, free zones operators, and other economic stakeholders for the overall economic development of Africa. This discussion should benefit all industry participants and should ultimately translate into more local and foreign direct investments, attractiveness, greater skills and knowledge transfer, deeper technology transfer, increased job creation, and a wider spread industrialization for our continent. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, permit me to share a little information of Nigeria's story from our perspective as apex regulator of oil and gas free zone. Of the over 200 free zones in Africa, Nigeria is host to about 1/6 of them, with roughly being specifically dedicated to oil and gas. Otherwise, out of the 1/6 total number of free zones in Africa, the oil and gas free zone today boasts of 9 of them, all dedicated to oil and gas. The oil and gas free zone, which we oversee, are predominantly located in the rich southern belt where Nigeria boasts of robust competitive advantage with regard to oil and gas. Like I said earlier on, the region holds the potential to become the energy belt of Africa, with Nigeria reportedly having Africa's largest gas reserve and the 9th largest gas reserve in the world. The oldest and the first dedicated oil and gas prison, the One Oil and Gas Prison, has in the last 20 years served as a logistics support base, manufacturing, shipping, and the services supply hub to the entire sector. Furthermore, our oil and gas prison has in the last 2 years attracted 2 decades, attracted over 16.6 billion US dollars foreign direct investment and over 255 million LDI. Recent data from just 3 years between 2017 and 2020 show our export totaling roughly about 382 million US dollars. These figures are in themselves mere little if they don't quantify the value that we have added to our primary stakeholders. As apex regulator of Nigeria's oil and gas prisons, our contribution to the industry is channeled toward improving efficiencies for zone operators in the sector, such that out of the departments of government of Nigeria, hundreds of departments of governments of Nigeria, the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, otherwise PEBEC, which is designed to measure and evaluate the performances of agencies of government. AEZO has won the 2018 PASS Award and consistently became among the top 3 in 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022, respectively. Despite our successes, we acknowledge that there is also the need to learn much from our brother regulators, authorities in the zone operators across the country. To this end, we are reminded again as to why this AGM is keenly important, as it gives us all the platform to share experiences for the betterment of the African continent. In conclusion, I would like to thank and acknowledge everyone here today for being part of this very important historic event. On behalf of the management and the staff of Oil and Gas Prison Authority, I thank you all and welcome you once again and wish you very successful deliberation and safe return to our respective destination after this event. Thank you. God bless you.
And finally, I want to invite our last Nigerian partner on stage, and that will be Oluwatoyin Isaac Elegbede, who's the Executive Director of Nigeria Economic Zones Association.
Mr. President, Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, ably represented by Sir Umana Okonumana, Minister of Niger Delta Affairs, our own Otumba Adeniyi Adebayo, CON, Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, the Deputy Minister of Trade, Federal Republic of Ghana, the chairman and members of Global Alliance on Special Economic Zones, GAZES, the executives of African Economic Zones Organization, the chief executives of NEBZA and OGZA, ladies and gentlemen, permit me to observe all protocols already established. Good morning. Mine will be a short speech. I don't actually regulate any zone in Nigeria. Our association, however, comprises of all registered, all licensed free zones and enterprises in Nigeria, the Nigeria Economic Zones Association. So, on behalf of the board and members of the Nigeria Economic Zones Association, I have the honor to welcome our delegates from across the continent to the African Union Commission 5th Symposium on Special Economic Zones and the 7th annual meeting of the African Economic Zones Organization. A year ago, when we gathered in Accra, Ghana, for the 6th annual meeting of AEZO, the decision for Nigeria to bid to host this 7th annual meeting was taken. The representative of the president, who was then the managing director of Oil and Gas Free Zones Authority, and Professor Soji Adesuba, who is the managing director of NEBZA, and myself, were all in Accra, and we took that decision then that Nigeria should bid to host the 7th annual meeting. We are glad that our bid was successful, and today we are hosting the two events. Permit me to also thank AEZO for accepting to allow the program coincide with our 30th anniversary, thereby making our brothers and sisters all over Africa and indeed the world to celebrate the anniversary with us. So as we deliberate on the theme of this year's event, I wish all of us a successful deliberation, and to our visiting delegates from all over the world, all I can say is Barika de Zoa, No, Ekabo. Thank you for coming and thank you for listening.